Um, I think I'll get us going. We have a lot to dig into in just an hour, so I'm eager for this conversation. My name is Ben Palmquist. I'm with an organization called Partners for Dignity and Rights, and I'm so honored and thrilled to be speaking with these amazing folks today. This panel is Organizing for Victory, Fighting for Healthcare for All in New York. And I think this is something that's really exciting, of course, if you live in New York State, but for the rest of us across the country, I'm actually on the West Coast. I think there's a lot of rich lessons here, and this is sort of what folks are doing on the ground in New York as part of a much larger movement that I think we're all a part of in different ways. And so what we're going to be talking today is about the struggle for universal publicly financed healthcare. So we're all supporting Medicare for all, of course, on the national level, but we know that there are political challenges from healthcare industries, from racist exclusion and other things. And so folks in, last I heard, at least 20 states are pushing bills for universal publicly financed healthcare. And here in New York, the New York Health Act has gone really far through the legislature, as we'll hear, and there's a really powerful people's movement behind it. So I'm going to ask our speakers to really quickly introduce themselves, and then we'll just jump into some discussion. So Senator Brisport, if you could just say a quick hello, who you are, and then pass it to somebody else to introduce themselves.
Hey everybody, my name is Jabari Brisport. I am a state senator in Brooklyn, New York, and my pronouns are he, him. And I'll pass it to Ursula.
Hi, I'm Ursula Rosam, pronouns she, her. I'm based in Syracuse, New York, and I'm one of the co-directors for the Campaign for New York Health. And Yuling?
Hey everybody, this is Yuling Koshu. I use she or they pronouns. I'm based in Brooklyn, New York City. I'm co-director with Ursula of the Campaign for New York Health. Mariana.
My name is Mariana Pineda. I am a healthcare organizer in Suffolk County and a former public school teacher in Nassau County, and one of the co-chairs for the DSA Long Island Healthcare Justice Working Group.
And again, my name is Ben Palmquist. I'm with Partners for Dignity and Rights. We're a support organization for grassroots movements across the country. I'm a former resident of Senator Brisport's district in Brooklyn, and I live now back in my hometown of Berkeley, California, on Ohlone land. And just to kick things off, I'm gonna pass things straight to you, Mariana, to tell us a little bit about sort of how you got involved with the New York Health Act and why it's something that you think is so important for folks in New York.
All right, thank you so much. So I started out getting politically active with the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016. I was actually 38 weeks pregnant, knocking doors for Bernie Sanders, and I went into labor doing Get Out the Vote for Bernie Sanders. And unfortunately, we did not win the primary. But I still had this overwhelming need to keep organizing because the issues that he spoke to, especially Medicare for All, really spoke to me because during that pregnancy, I was 36 years old. The doctors declared it a high-risk pregnancy. I was diagnosed with antepartum depression. And rather than put me out on disability, my non-public school in Queens, New York, terminated my employment, and I lost my health insurance during a high-risk pregnancy. It took over a month to get approved for Medicaid for myself as a pregnant woman. And I had 3 children at the time, one of whom has significant mental health issues, and she was in a residential inpatient facility. And because I lost my health insurance through my employer, she was discharged from the mental health facility. So that's when I knew that this was going to be my issue. And I had no idea how deeply personal it would become because in April 2020, I was diagnosed with COVID pneumonia. I was hospitalized in the peak of the pandemic. I subsequently suffered a miscarriage and still went back to school in September to teach, now in a public school with what I thought was a union that would back me. And instead, in September, I was hospitalized again, this time in the ICU. COVID had filled my lungs with blood clots. I had to have an emergency surgery called a manual thrombectomy. While you're awake, they go inside and they removed 6 blood clots from my lungs. I had a 2-inch blood clot blocking my pulmonary artery. I went into organ failure, and my respiratory therapist says that most people in my situation do not make it. So at this point, nothing is going to stop me other than death to keep me from fighting for the New York Health Act and Medicare for all, because shortly after my hospitalization, I was unable to go back to work. At this point, I was now in a public school on Long Island, but I was an untenured teacher. So rather than put me out on disability, my union rep said there's nothing they can do, and my school district terminated me. My COBRA was over $3,000 a month. I had lost my income. I was in and out of the hospital. I had now 4 children, 2 of which have disabilities, and we had to pay $3,000 a month. And the only reason that I had health insurance was because our dear friend Katie, former executive director of the Campaign for New York Health, started a GoFundMe to raise over $12,000 to pay my COBRA for 4 months until I finally harassed Chuck Schumer enough to pass the COBRA part of the package. So yay, now I have free COBRA, but I still don't have dental. I still don't have vision. I still have to pay copays at every appointment. And I have major transportation issues. So this is a deeply, deeply personal battle for me and for so many others who have had their lives impacted by COVID. So we're not going to stop fighting.
Thank you so much, Mariana. Your strength is just really incredible. And I know, Ursula, you've been talking to a lot of people around the state, right, who have also been sort of struggling with all sorts of egregious denials of healthcare. Can you tell us a little bit, sort of paint the context of sort of where, how the Campaign for New York Health is organizing and what the New York Health Act is?
Sure. And maybe what I would like to do before we launch into that, I know we have we have a video that we wanted to show to kind of lay the groundwork for talking more about the New York Health Act. Yuling, are you able to cue it up? Or is Linda playing it for us?
Thank you, Linda, for bringing it up.
Linda, are you able to get play on it?
Yuling, do you have to hit play on your end?
Yeah, it didn't work. Let me try one more time.
Okay. Hang with us, folks. We're 2 years into the pandemic and still dealing with technical difficulties.
Yeah.
Grab the wrinkly dog, 11 letters, and it's a rhyme. Grab the wrinkly dog, and it's a rhyme. Hey, my apartment's on fire. It's right around the corner. Come on. Whoa. First things first. Are you insured? Yes, sorry. Here you go. If we could just hurry, though, that'd be great, because my apartment's literally on fire. We got a slight issue here. What issue? It says here you're behind on your premium payments. Really? I don't think so. I do. It's right here on your file. $660. Oh, my bad. Can we just take care of that later? No can do. See, your specific provider, Bright Shield Protector Fidelity Horizon, says you need up-to-date premium payments for your provider to be reimbursed. Can you not talk over me? I'm talking with you to support you. So the thing is, I haven't reached my deductible anyway, so it would all be out of pocket. Right, but to get credit towards your deductible, you need to have up-to-date premium payments. Okay. Sorry. Here you go. Here's my credit card. If we could just hurry, though, that'd be great, because my apartment is literally on fire. So sorry, but we don't take American Express. Talking over me. Oh, sorry. Here you go. Actually, hold up. This isn't your home precinct. It should be. I live right around the corner. New address? Yeah, we moved a couple months ago. Well, that's an issue because your primary care precinct is still tied to your former address. This precinct is out of network for you, so I'm going to need a referral. A referral? There's a fire in my apartment right now. Oh, dear. What? Did you recently change jobs? Yes, so what? There's a gap in your insurance. Your old coverage was tied to your old job, so when you shifted jobs... My home is literally burning down! Hey, could be worse. How? Was it on fire when you moved in? No, of course not. Seen it before. Then it's a pre-existing condition and it's not covered.
See how it feels?
I kind of like it.
Oh,
What? What?
the crossword. Carpe Sharpe.
Ooh, nice pull. This is absurd.
It would be absurd if we ran fire departments like this.
So why do we run healthcare this way?
Hey, I live right next door to you. Your apartment fire spread to my apartment.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
Here, take a bucket. Can you help us?
Are you insured?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that, Linda. So the video shows how our system is so absurd, and we heard from Mariana what the impact is on individuals. And I mean, in New York, even though we have a pretty strong public health system, one of the strongest Medicaid systems in the country, there's still over 1 million New Yorkers without any insurance. And our research at the Campaign for New York Health and through other entities has found that at least 50% of New Yorkers with insurance are still skipping healthcare, and largely because of the bureaucracy, the bureaucratic violence that is created and inflicted on us by private health insurance companies like Horizon, Fidelity Insurance, and the real bad guys, the real insurance companies. So I'll speak quickly about who is the Campaign for New York Health? What is the New York Health Act? The New York Health Act is a bill in the state legislature that would guarantee the right to health care in New York. Like Ben said, it's like Medicare for all, but starting in New York State, very similar to California's CalCare bill. And what I think is important to know about the New York Health Act is that it's informed by human rights principles to establish a health system that's equitable, universal, comprehensive, and accountable to we the people, unlike our current system that is controlled by profit-driven insurance companies. So when we passed the New York Health Act, instead of worrying about getting insurance through a job, through a spouse, or buying it out of pocket, all New Yorkers would automatically have healthcare covered by a public statewide fund. The Campaign for New York Health formed in 2014 as a coalition to coordinate organizing and movement building to pass the New York Health Act. The New York Health Act had been around since the 1990s, so we're about to celebrate its 30th birthday. But organizing really picked up in a coordinated way after the passage of the Affordable Care Act. We saw that even though the ACA expanded healthcare to millions, insurance companies and employers started pushing more healthcare costs onto workers and onto patients. So we really saw a rise in things like high deductible health plans after the passage of the ACA. And our research at Campaign for New York Health has found that people who have ACA marketplace plans are actually more likely to skip care due to cost, even though they're buying a private insurance product through the marketplace. So the Campaign for New York Health formed in 2014 through strategic partnership of the New York State Nurses Association, Physicians for a National Health Program, Statewide Senior Action, Metro Justice, and Coalition for the Public Health System, organizations that had already been supporting the New York Health Act. And the first phase of the campaign we hosted a series of public hearings in coordination with the Assembly Health Committee. And this allowed for a round of powerful endorsements from labor unions in New York. And then over the last 5 years, the campaign has grown to close to 200 endorsing organizations, over 500 business endorsers. And we really saw the campaign blossom after the 2016 election when Donald Trump took the White House. And we saw that progressive energy really rose up in New York. And in 2018, we saw a wave of progressives that support the New York Health Act elected to our state legislature, followed by another round of progressive left Democratic wins in New York that won us a supermajority in the state legislature in 2020. And so now we're at a point where the majority of the state assembly and state legislature support the New York Health Act. And we have some commitments from leadership to move the bill forward. But we know that the last mile is going to be the hardest. And so now we're preparing to strategically escalate the demand for a vote on the Health Act in 2020 in January when our legislature reconvenes.
2022, yes.
2022, thanks.
Let's not repeat 2020 again, please. Thank you, Ursula. So what we're going to do now is sort of go around, and folks are going to talk about some of the specific strategies and tactics they're using, challenges that are coming up. And I think this will be of interest if you're in New York. Definitely tune in, because this is this fight has had major victories already, but it's not over. So there's a lot of work to be done in ways that all sorts of people and organizations can support the effort. And if you're not in New York, listen in, because there's a lot, I think, of lessons for organizers on other campaigns for universal healthcare in other states and on other issues, right? There's points of connection, I think we'll hear in what people are saying to racial and immigrant justice, worker justice, gender and queer justice, and power building really across the board. So I want to go next to Senator Brisport. And Ursula told us a bit about the New York Health Act. Can you tell us sort of like where it stands in the legislature and what you think is needed both inside the legislature but also outside of it in terms of organizing to sort of really get it over the finish line?
Sure. So right now, the New York Health Act is in sort of stasis, like all bills. And since this is a national panel, I'll just quickly explain to everyone watching that in New York, in the state legislature, we do like a half-year session. So we only convene and vote on bills from January through June. And then from July through December, we just work in the district and constituent services and events and so on and so forth. So it's October, so we're not voting on anything right now. We're conferencing anything right now. But in order to talk about the push for next year, I'll talk a little bit more about what we did for this year, the political moment we are in. Oh, Ursula, you scared me. I was like, no, we can't lose Ursula. So just building off of some things that Ursula said, we came further than we ever have in the past with this bill in New York. So the New York Health Act has been introduced again and again and again for about 30 years, since the early 1990s. And like Ursula said, this is the first time ever we have a supermajority, a veto-proof majority in both the state assembly and the state senate. This was also the first year ever that there was a majority of co-sponsors in the state senate. Fun factoid for those watching, even though New York is a deep blue state, our upper chamber, the state senate, has actually been Republican controlled most of history due to gerrymandering. So this is one of the first and few times that Democrats have even controlled the Senate for more than 2 years. And again, we have a majority of co-sponsors such that if every person co-sponsoring the bill were to vote on it, it would pass. So one issue we ran up into is essentially fake co-sponsors. There are politicians who will, they'll meet with advocates, they'll meet with the Ursulas of New York and say, you got it, I'm on the bill, I'll co-sponsor it. And then they'll run to leadership and say, please do not bring this to a vote. I don't actually want to vote on it. I did it to get the advocates off my back. So I don't know who they are, but I know that they exist in both the state assembly and the state senate. And that's really where we were at, the impasse, such that, okay, we have enough people co-sponsors such that if we vote, it passes, and yet we do not vote on it. Leadership does not bring it to a vote. And that happened in both the assembly and the senate, in terms of them literally not bringing it to a vote to basically, shield those fake sponsors and other external reasons, which we'll get into when we talk more about labor. But in terms of building an inside-outside strategy, some things we did in parallel. So in addition to a lot of the great advocacy that Ursula and the campaign were doing, the panels, the talks, the demonstrations, just the consistent pressure from the outside, on the inside, we took steps to keep pushing the needle forward. So one big push I did this past legislative session was to organize a cadre of my colleagues in the Senate to push for us to discuss the Health Act in conference. And for those who don't know what that means, basically we meet in sort of two types of forums in the state Senate. There's session, when we actually vote up or down on bills. And then conference is like when you just meet with your own party and you discuss bills. And since we have a supermajority of Democrats, really all the action happens in conference. And by the time you're voting on something, you expect it to pass. You know, the leadership will not bring in anything to a vote that they think will fail. So even just getting us to talk about it in conference was a major way to legitimize the issue, legitimize it, and make it seem like there was movement on it. And that helped put pressure on the leader to show that there was a large cadre of senators who were interested in discussing this and ultimately voting on it. We didn't vote on it, but one other pressure thing that I think was a beautiful way of marrying inside and outside, because not everything we do is in parallel. One thing we did that was very well meshed up was essentially a filibuster for the New York Health Act. And this came in the last week of session, where we knew what bills were going to be voted on the next day. We had a list of them. And so working with advocates in the DSA's healthcare working group and the Campaign for New York Health Act, we basically drafted up short speeches, because as I said, I'm allowed to speak for 2 minutes on every bill. You know, whether I'm going to vote yes or no, I'm allowed to speak 2 minutes on every bill. And we basically drafted up short speeches for as many bills as possible and linked that bill to the New York Health Act. You know, one of the people's favorite ones watching was one about, there was a bill about really clarifying the signage in Long Island regarding turtle crossings. And an incredible writer that made the link that there are veterinarians in Long Island that provide free healthcare to the turtles, and that if the turtles can get free healthcare, we should all get free healthcare. And we had a lot of great speeches like that. And you know, it didn't come to a vote. We pushed really hard, but I've spoken with the sponsor of the bill, Senator Rivera, and what we are now in the process of forming are working groups. And working groups are a major step forward, because they're a chance for legislators of differing ideologies to work out kinks, and tend to be done before very controversial bills. It's something that happened in like major taxation bills. It happened in the bill to legalize cannabis in New York. And there's never been a case where a working group formed and then we didn't vote on the bill. So this is a very good sign. I know it's like slow going and it's a slog, but we are making consistent progress. And everything we can do, we're going to vote on this bill and pass it next year in 2022.
Exciting. Well, it is, as somebody who's long been rather cynical about legislative politics, it's just really inspiring to have true champions like you in there. But Ursula, I know we know too that, you know, what happens in the legislature is very much shaped by people power, right? And how much we have on the outside. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the particular base building strategies that the Campaign for New York Health has been using?
Sure. So for better or worse, there really are no shortcuts in organizing and building power. And I think we see that in parallel, that there's no shortcuts to passing huge, revolutionary, transformative pieces of legislation. But we know that this is all worth doing because the end product is going to be winning the right to healthcare. And so the Campaign for New York Health has really had to move with intention every step of the way since 2014 to really make the most of our limited financial resources. Our theory of change is very much rooted in the power of stories, and that in the belief that to pass something big, we need a movement led by those directly impacted by the failures of the system, putting coordinated grassroots pressure on decision makers. So I would describe the base building strategy as having like two prongs. One is strategically developing the involvement and leadership of organizations within the campaign, and then developing the leadership and skills of advocates who can credibly speak to the need to change the healthcare system. And one project that I'll mention that really helped us do all this was a healthcare rights survey that we ran mostly in 2018, where campaigners spoke with about 2,500 New Yorkers about their healthcare stories. This project allowed us to engage organizations to get their members and contacts to participate. There was a massive canvassing effort involved with this. And then the relationships developed through that survey project actually fed into a series of successful public hearings that happened in 2019 on the Health Act. And I can't speak the exact numbers, but I would say it was like 40 to 3, supporters of the New York Health Act to opponents at each of the hearings. And so this really helped us show that there is popular demand for universal health care. And to really, we were able to win the public debate on the bill. And then COVID happened and everything kind of slowed down. But this healthcare rights survey project, we were really inspired to do it by the Vermont Workers Center and by Put People First in Pennsylvania. And so we've also done things like healthcare storytelling trainings to help people develop their skills and to invite organizations to bring their members to reflect on healthcare access. But I would say that the base building survey project was probably one of our, really successful efforts to build the base of support.
And Mariana, I just want to invite you if are there any sort of particular base building things that you've been involved in on Long Island that you want to share sort of how those went?
So fortunately, I am a Gemini and an ENFP, so talking to strangers is my favorite. And what we have done is we have had canvassing for the New York Health Act using the survey tool that was created by the Campaign for New York Health. We built a coalition with a group called Long Island Activists, which came out of the Bernie movement and is a NIPAN chapter member. We worked with Nassau and Suffolk DSA chapters. We worked with the Poor People's Campaign, and we would just go to the mall, like regular suburban Long Island, and especially like around Christmas time and when the mall was packed pre-pandemic, and we would just stop people and talk to them like, hey, are you dissatisfied with your healthcare? And, they always think that you're trying to like sell them something, because we know that the health insurance industry is a giant for-profit industry and they are commodifying our bodies, because that's how capitalism works. And so what we did was we just approached everyday people. We set up booths at street fairs. We walked around clipboards at like community festivals. And we just engaged people outside the framework of Republican or Democrat, left or right, and just through the lens of whatever that particular group that we're speaking to. So I've spoken to PTAs and gotten PTAs on board with the New York Health Act. I've spoken with school boards and we've gotten school boards on board with the New York Health Act. When you talk to people, you find out what their needs are and you find out how they can benefit from the New York Health Act. And then they realize that, oh yes, okay, my taxes may go up a little bit more, but I won't have to worry about copays. I won't have to worry about premiums. I won't have to worry about deciding whether I want to fill my prescription or fill my gas tank. And we don't have to worry about whether I want to go to this appointment or I want to pay my rent. Because I know for me, when I was in the ICU, I got a bill for $165,000 for removing the blood clots that COVID had caused in my lungs and my ICU stay. If I hadn't had insurance, I would have been bankrupted. I'm a single parent. So talk to people, find out what their niche is. We've been canvassing small businesses. We've been going door to door in different communities and talking to small business owners. Most of them can't afford to give their employees health insurance benefits. So these folks are either applying for Medicaid, going through the exchange and getting other subsidized healthcare, or going without. And so by reaching out to different groups and meeting people where they're at, we're able to build popular support through all of the impacted communities. And it really is an intersectional issue. When I was teaching at East Rockaway, I met with Senator Kaminsky's office, and I let them know that if you are on Medicaid, you get one pair of eyeglasses every 2 years. Imagine if you are a young child with ADHD and you break your eyeglasses in that first year. Guess what? Now for a year, that kid doesn't have eyeglasses because the parents can't afford to replace them. The impact of on his learning, because he can't see the blackboard, is number one. Number two, the impact on me as a classroom teacher, now trying to deal with behavioral issues because the kid can't see. And now think about the 28 other kids that are in the classroom with this kid who are having their learning impacted, all because this kid doesn't have a pair of glasses. And if Senator Kaminsky would have actually backed up what he had done when he fake pretended to support the New York Health Act and then revoked his support, maybe the constituents in his district wouldn't be having that issue. So I'm proud to say that the East Rockaway parents are now very much in favor of the New York Health Act, as are the parents in the Roosevelt School District. And we are going one by one throughout Nassau and Suffolk counties, and we are meeting with the community, and we are letting them know that there is a better option. You shouldn't have to wait for the one time a school year that the dental clinic comes to the school parking lot to get your kids' needs met. You shouldn't be an undocumented person praying that the clinic is going to open and you can take your kids because you're uninsured and you're afraid to apply for Medicaid because of your documentation status. There are so many reasons why the New York Health Act is probably the most intersectional issue there is. You want to talk about racial justice? Talk about how certain communities don't have access to healthcare? The New York Health Act could fix that. You want to talk about all of these different ways that the New York Health Act would make people's lives exponentially better, and you find those audiences and you share that message and you connect with people on a deeply personal level. And especially when I share my story, I am now 42 years old. I use an adult walker and I have stage 2 congestive heart failure due to COVID. And I'm going to keep fighting, and I'm going to keep talking, and I'm going to keep spreading the single payer gospel, because if we can get this passed in California and in New York, we can get the legislation to spread across the country and realize, especially after what we've experienced with COVID, the number one priority for this nation should be passing Medicare for all. And to do that, we need to pass the New York Health Act here in New York.
Yeah, right on. It's such a powerful encapsulation of community organizing. Part of me is like, let's just end right there. That was a great rallying cry, but there's more questions I want to ask. And Yuling, I want to go to you. So Mariana was just talking about sort of what the community organizing looks like. And I know you've been working similarly in an intersectional way in sort of organizing organizations, right? Building a sort of a really powerful coalition that I think, you know, reflects New York's diversity in terms of race and culture, immigration, geography, all the sort of like different way, you know, the different facets of New York communities. Can you tell us a little bit about that dimension of the campaign's work?
Yeah, I mean, Mariana covered a lot of that there's a lot of simultaneous work, but that all of our work is very intentionally rooted in everyone's stories and having those one-on-one conversations, so that this is bigger. The New York Health Act is bigger than just health policy, right? More than what happens at the doctor's office, as Mariana was explaining. That there's no more bureaucratic violence of, are you American enough? Are you sick enough or too sick? Are you married enough, working enough, or not working enough? So we're really intentional about building a movement around healthcare, but it's never just about healthcare, right? It's building power, it's breaking silos, uniting across differences, exposing our common enemies, and helping us shift the narrative and narrators. All of the things that help us build a mass movement, especially of those who have the most to gain from toppling racism, militarism, ecological devastation, and poverty, right? You can tell the Poor People's Campaign, we work closely with them, and our theories of change align very closely. And we know that even when we pass the New York Health Act, the health insurance companies aren't just going to go say, well, we lost, I guess we can stop fighting everybody now. You know, no, they're going to try and keep their death grip on Albany, right? So those are just some of the reasons that we know we need a huge mass movement, which is, you know, requires coalition work. And again, we're never just talking about healthcare. And for us, also housing is also a main priority, even though we're the Campaign for New York Health. We're talking about how women of color are the lowest paid healthcare workers, how medical debt is a top reason for people being denied housing opportunities, that hospitals nationwide, right? And especially all over New York State, though, hospitals are shuttering just because real estate and private insurance companies are putting profit over people. How 40% of people experiencing incarceration have mental health illnesses, and that more than half of that 40% were not able to take their medications at the time of their arrest, which on top of that was most likely a violent arrest, right? Because cops are not trained to care. And how even when we raise wages, that money doesn't stay in workers' pockets. Profiteers like health insurance corporations simply raise their fees and extract more money from us. And the narratives of scarcity intentionally pushed upon us, right? Pitting budget for health justice, Medicaid, education versus housing, all of that. The New York Health Act makes significant structural space to solve a lot of these problems and reach beyond health justice. And for me, single payer clicked as a racial and economic justice issue. I like to quote Dr. Rhea Boyd a lot. She says, racism works to scatter and fracture families. And single payer allows us to have the care we need to respond to this perpetual trauma of racism and capitalism, right? It creates space to be more, to be able to more directly address racism in medicine, to raise wages, to have more culturally competent care, more BIPOC mental health providers, and more. So we want to build this mass movement and coalition beyond tweet alliances, even beyond just standing next to each other in solidarity, like at rallies, right? Showing up at the same rallies, yes, do that. But deeper than that, we want the coalition to have the political education for each of our advocates to understand why all of these things are related, and how the New York Health Act eliminates a major playground of the ruling class, right? And helps us have more imagination to achieve every piece of collective liberation that we need and want.
Well said. I want to, so another dimension of the coalition building that I know you all are working on is trying to build stronger relationships and build commitment from labor unions. And the labor movement, segments of the labor movement, I'll say, have always been, fighting for health justice on the front lines. And nurses unions in particular in New York and elsewhere, and a number of other unions have been really sort of unflinching advocates. But not all unions are quite so steadfastly supportive. And I know that you all have run into some tricky politics at times. And this is something people across the country are dealing with too. And so I'm curious, and Ursula, maybe I'll start with you, if you can tell us a little bit on sort of where unions in New York State currently stand on the New York Health Act and what the campaign is doing to build labor support.
So when the campaign first launched, it was thanks to the New York State Nurses Association, who had been advocating for the Health Act since the 90s. And we're really proud to have the support of New York's largest healthcare unions, the New York State Nurses Association, 1199 SEIU, the Committee of Interns and Residents, whose members are all on the front lines and seeing day in and day out the fatal results of privatized and fragmented healthcare. And when the campaign launched in 2014, we did secure the endorsements of several dozen unions. However, in 2018, once the Health Act got closer to majority support, and after the Supreme Court Janus ruling, we saw many of our union allies withdraw their support. And at the moment, I would say that the New York's labor movement is split on the Health Act. It's not a secret. It's been in the press. Public employee unions in New York State are currently actively opposing the New York Health Act. And we see this not necessarily, we don't see labor as the opposition, but rather allies that we have to bring back into the fold of the campaign, because we know that that labor is extremely powerful in New York politics. And so if we want to win, we have a greater chance of winning if we have labor at our side. And so what's the reasoning for their opposition? Publicly, what we're hearing is that they're concerned that the benefits their members enjoy would not be as good as what they have now if we pass the Health Act, and that their members would have to pay more for healthcare, both of which are not necessarily true. So I think we try to characterize it as a misunderstanding, and we have to really talk more so labor leaders better understand the New York Health Act. But we know that there's a lot of work to do there. And so the strategy that we're taking is two-pronged. One is to increase labor power behind the New York Health Act by increasing coordination with our union allies, with the healthcare unions. We're working on growing single-payer healthcare committees within our supportive, within the supportive unions. And then we're working with strategic allies like the Democratic Socialists of America, like New York Progressive Action Network, to build rank and file support within the public unions, so that union leaders are hearing from the members that they represent that the New York Health Act is something that public workers in New York State want to see happen in our state. And then there's also high-level conversations happening between legislators and union leaders. So it's kind of, there's various fronts of struggle, but ultimately we feel committed to a process of winning back public labor support, so that we can win with labor at our side. We know that labor has won huge gains for working people. The weekend, I love the weekend, family medical leave, higher minimum wages. And so we hope that in the very near future, enacting the New York Health Act will be another victory for the labor movement and for all New Yorkers. So that's like an overview of where things stand with labor support for the New York Health Act.
Thank you, Ursula. And Senator Brisport, I don't know if folks know, but before you were a senator, I understand you were a rank and file union member. And I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about, as a union member, some of the organizing you did before you were elected.
Yeah, of course. So I'll just start by saying just the misunderstanding, as we phrase it with labor unions, is just heartbreaking to me. One as one of the openly socialist elected officials, I'm always in support of the labor movement, and it breaks my heart when we have misunderstandings or disagreements. And two, being a union member, I was a teacher. I was in the UFT, the United Federation of Teachers. I know that unions are built on solidarity, and that we're only as strong as we are when we all stick together. And to me, the only logical conclusion is that the biggest form of solidarity is to guarantee healthcare to all of us. So what I did when I actually found out that the UFT was no longer in support of the New York Health Act, I had a meeting with the political director back in May. And, we talked a little bit about some of the concerns that they had with it. We went through it a little bit. That did not lead to the union changing their positions. So what I did was I began reaching out to rank and file union members and reminding them really of I see as the roots of the UFT and the education unions support for universal healthcare. Both the city UFT and also the New York statewide NYSET had passed resolutions in support of the New York Health Act in years past. And it's just a 180 to all of a sudden stop doing that. So we started internally organizing to see if members could, push for a re-upping of the resolution, to just say, let's pass it again. Let's do a 2021 resolution in support of the New York Health Act. And we gathered several hundred signatures of it. Also did not move it towards a resolution at the time. I'm just being honest on, what was effective and what was not, but it's still proving as a useful tool for seeing which rank and file members are more in line with and who we can organize with within the UFT and NYSET at large for next year, especially because in New York, the teachers union is incredibly powerful. And I think that's common across the country, but in New York especially, and I'm proud of that too, because go teachers. And honestly, if we can get them on our side on this issue, it would be momentous for the movement and for passing this bill.
So I was also a public school teacher here on Long Island, and I spoke with all of my colleagues, and we had very popular, strong rank and file support for the New York Health Act amongst our teachers, specifically because of our student population. We have a student-based health clinic. Many of our students get all of their health care exclusively when they're at school, but that's only for the high school. We don't have a clinic in any of our elementary schools or in our middle school. And this was something that was very popular. When I approached our union president, he would not even let me bring it to the meeting. So you had to do it, in the faculty lounge. And now with COVID, things are very different in terms of organizing. But the fact remains is rank and file union members, teachers in Nassau and Suffolk County support the New York Health Act. PTA members support the New York Health Act. School board members support the New York Health Act. So what we're doing here on Long Island is using the fact that Suffolk DSA has had their first openly socialist school board member elected in Riverhead, and we are pushing to get all of the school districts on Long Island to pass their own resolutions in support of the New York Health Act, and then we're going to bring that back to our senators to let them know that their constituents demand the New York Health Act, and we're not going to play these games like we did with Jim Gorin, who, ran on the New York Health Act, openly supported the New York Health Act, got elected, and then turned his back on his constituents, saying that, I have concerns. He had no concerns when we were knocking doors. He had no concerns when we were, donating and phone banking for free. But once he was elected, so I'm calling out several of our Long Island senators who have not supported this, or who did support it, and then, just like the UFT and other orgs, pulled back their support when there was a possibility of it passing.
Thanks, Mariana. Yeah, I think there's so often a tendency, or what we're told anyway, is that democracy is sort of more of a passive spectator sport, right? And I think what you're really drawing out, and Ursula talked about how there's no shortcuts. I mean, it just takes all these things, whether we're putting pressure on legislators or putting pressure on union leadership or whoever, it just take a lot of on the ground work and organizing folks in our communities, in our workplaces. And Yuling, I'm going to go back to you now. So you've been doing connecting this sort of in-person organizing to digital strategies in some really smart ways. And so I'm curious for you to talk to us a little bit about how you've sort of tactically been able to connect the dots between those strategies.
Thank you. So this is just an example of a simple petition. We have a petition online for business owners to sign on to. We also have a paper petition. So we did, like Mariana was mentioning, people were going door to door to businesses also, but everyone had to sign a petition one way or the other. And so when they did, we get their name, right? We have, ideally, we have an organizer follow up with them for a one-on-one conversation. And what we've been able to, like all the businesses on this slide, for example, Booney Coffee, Cold Spring Cheese Shop, the Farmers and Beacon's Closet in Brooklyn, each of these businesses have gone through the steps of giving us a quote, signing the petition, giving us a quote and a photo for a quote graphic that you can see on here, that they've held events with their neighbors on the New York Health Act and why it matters to their community, about their experiences with healthcare. They've gone on to share on their social media, submitted as part of testimonials at public hearings or showed up at the public hearings, shared in lobby meetings with legislators, and written op-eds and letters to the editor. So all of these things, they've taken all these steps, and that was just simply because they signed a petition online. So that's one example. And the important piece there for all of us organizers, right, is that you have the capacity to follow up with everyone who signs the petition. Something else we tried was there's Facebook lead ads. We are a scrappy organization, so it's not like we have a big budget for this, but we did try it last session, and you can see there's examples of here where we tried different ways of targeting folks, or what graphics speak to which demographics of folks or worked better to get people to sign the petition, and further what asks worked better. We tried first, because our priority is working on our stories with folks. We tried that ask first, will you share your story? And found that it was a little bit of a hurdle, right? And there's pros and cons to asking that question first, but we then compared it to asking, will you just sign this petition, right, through the Facebook lead ad? And we did find, of course, that the petition is a lower entry level, lower bar, lower energy to sign a petition than to think about your story and share it. But we also learned, something else we learned was that the Spanish language Facebook lead ads worked really well. And then we understood that we had to ramp up. We had a gap in our Spanish language speaking organizers to be able to follow up with folks. Then one thing our online to offline organizing is we emphasize also building leadership. And so we have a slew of trainings, and one of them we do pretty consistently is a storytelling training. And what we've been able to do is see that folks come to the storytelling training, which has been virtual these past couple of years. And then from that training, the participants might take a sign selfie or go on social media. And here you can see we have Dancers for New York Health Act. That was created totally unprompted from us, but they took it among themselves to collect sign selfies and do stories. And the farmers here also did stories and videos and amplification. And so we have, for example, Drew here, who is an essential worker from Syracuse, went to a storytelling training, did a sign selfie, put himself out on social media, did a 2-minute story video, and then in that last picture, you can see that he's speaking at a public event. And so we're really trying to build leadership through this, even if it's from online to offline, emphasizing building leadership. I think I will stop there.
That's excellent. Can I ask you just to say a little bit more about the sort of multilingual work you're doing? You mentioned the digital outreach in Spanish, and I know you've been working in other languages as well.
Yeah, so we definitely have a lot of work to do, but we try to have as many of our materials in as many languages as possible, certainly at least in English and Spanish. And we work also with partner organizations so that we can make sure that, we can have all the materials in the world in all the different languages. But if the people in those communities who need it in that language aren't receiving it doesn't matter, right? So it's a lot of work with partner organizations who work directly with those communities that need those languages to work through them. And especially since the Campaign for New York Health, we're an amazing, beautiful coalition. But Ursula and I, we don't work directly in communities or have community memberships, right? We rely on our coalition and the partner organizations in them to reach the various communities. So there's a lot of just long-term work of building the skills to be able to have things in multiple languages, whether it's materials or events, right? And canvassing one-on-one, having Spanish speakers, for example, but also understanding what their needs are, right? And how the New York Health Act relates to them.
Thank you, Yuling. I think we are somehow miraculously a little bit ahead of where we wanted to be. I was so sure we were going to run out of time. So in a minute, we're going to go to Ursula and Senator Brisbois to close us out. But I just wanted to invite any of you all, if there's anything else you didn't get a chance to say that you wanted to share in this space, or any questions you want to ask of each other. I can't hear you, Senator.
Sorry. Just wanted to kind of riff off something Mariana was talking about earlier, where, she brought the issue to her union leadership and he didn't want to hear it. And, there's a real, that really echoes for me what I was talking about in the legislature too, where, there is theoretically the support, but they refuse to bring it to a vote. And, even within the UFT, my understanding was that, regardless of rank and file memberships, where they were leaning, the union leadership themselves did not want to discuss it or even bring it to a vote to re-up a resolution. And I mean, that to me is a real crisis of democracy in our state. And, I think that is something that needs to be part of the conversation as we continue to go into the next year, that if the rank and file of the union are supporting something, or if the majority of legislators are supporting something on paper, and honestly, I don't care if you're a fake co-sponsor and, you put your name there, you're an adult, you have to own up to your decisions. Like, we need to, it needs to move forward.
Amen. Well, I'm just very, very excited, and I hope that there are people watching this, and I hope that, I don't know if we're able to share out links and let them know how to find out more from the Campaign for New York Health and things of that nature. Yeah, I'm excited. So I really hope, and if you are outside of New York State and you want to do this kind of organizing, see if there's a local DSA chapter in your community, or see if there's a local Physicians National Health Plan chapter in your community, or there are other orgs doing similar work. So get involved, please.
Absolutely. And I think Ursula and Yuling, do you have some more sort of links or action steps for people to share?
Yeah, I think Linda and Yuling, you're going to get the slides back up. So please check out the Campaign for New York Health website. We know that the only way that we're going to win this is through organizing. We have to be very strategic and intentional in our work. Yuling, next slide. For those who want to volunteer, and you can actually volunteer almost from anywhere. You can check out our volunteer page. We're doing regular phone banking and text banking. And we know that Netroots Nation is a community of skilled organizers. And so we would love you to join and help win universal healthcare in New York. There's really a role for everyone. Next slide. And as I mentioned, we're pretty scrappy. If you saw our budget, you might be shocked or amazed or sad. We really want to scale up in the coming year to be able to increase our comms capabilities, to bring on organizers, to really be able to escalate pressure and push for a vote, and make New York State the first state to pass universal health care. So please, if you are someone with deep pockets or know people with deep pockets, the Campaign for New York Health can put your resources to good work. Next slide.
I could just chime in on that. Foundations are really not supporting organizing for universal healthcare because I think they're too bought into the system. And I do think what's happening in New York really matters to the rest of us and the rest of the country as well, because they're really sort of on the vanguard here of really being able to pass something which I think would set up the whole rest of the country to really advance health justice too. So
thanks, Ben. So yes, as Mona Lisa says, money please. Next slide. And of course, if you're a New Yorker watching this presentation, please contact our legislative leaders and urge them to make passing the New York Health Act a priority in the coming session. I think you can visit the complicated URL on the screen or at nyhcampaign.org. We have our action tool available there. And you can do it by texting. So I think that's it for me. Oh, actually, no, we have, we're also working on a week of action to pass New York Health in mid-November to really get the New York Health Act on the radar of the progressive movement and of legislators right after the November election as we start ramping up for the legislative session. So if you are in New York, sign up now to host your local action in mid-November.
Thank you, Ursula. I hope everybody else is half as inspired as I am by the amazing work you all are doing. Is there, Senator Brisport, Mariana, does anyone want to share a final sort of call to action, words of inspiration before we close out?
Yeah, I just want to say, one, you saw a lot of ways to get plugged in New York. And, if you are not in New York, like Mariana said, your local DSA chapter is probably working on universal healthcare in your state. And I just want to read what Ben said about why this is important wherever you're, even if you're not in New York, why this is important. So if we follow the model in Canada with universal healthcare, it started in one province in Saskatchewan. When they saw it worked, they moved it nationwide. So wherever you are, you can still help out in New York, and it helps you too, because you can help us become the first domino leading to a nationwide single-payer healthcare system, and we can finally catch up with the rest of the developed world. So help us out, and you're helping yourself out. It's solidarity again, and thanks for watching.